No one ever comes into a gym and leaves the gym in a worse mood than they came in. So usually people improve their mental state immediately, and then you do that enough times over time, and then they improve their physical health substantially. Welcome to Fitter Every Day, the show where we break fitness into bite-sized bits to help make you fitter every day. If you're noticing a little bit of different audio, it's because we're actually doing a live podcast at Iowa State University. So this is in the Forker building where Shawn and I took hours and hours.
Countless numbers of classes.
Hours of classes and taking naps in the lounges. So this lounge is actually where we're at, is in the lower level of Forker. We are old enough that this wasn't even a thing when we were here. So we got, I don't know, maybe half dozen to a dozen students that are going to be here. And whether or not they have questions, we'll see by the time we get done. So I'm Jeff Woody. So I'll be the kind of the main host-ish. And this is Shawn Nutzman, who's my business partner.
I'll be adding in some tiny bits of information here and there.
The point of this, so Deb Power is the internship coordinator for the Iowa State, and we both actually had to get our internships kind of guided through this program. So we've known her, and so she asked us to come up here to do this kind of live podcast thing to address the students about stuff that we wish we would have known from where we were as students to now. And so then on top of that, what does it take to be a professional? Because how do you get to be a professional in this industry where we are? So that's more or less what we kind of got lined up to be. So the first thing we wanted to at least start with a little bit was how we got to here and give a background, because most of these students don't know who we are, despite the 5 minutes of banter we had before we actually started. But background for the listeners and students here. So you can go ahead and start. Like, how did you get into fitness and here and from there?
I'll start just with our first business, Acceleration Iowa. I started at our Ankeny location in 2008. It was right after I did my internship in the Urbandale location. And I remember one of our classes here, we had to design a facility that we were going to run and operate and go through the financials and everything. And I remember the project that we did. It was just this huge facility. I can't even imagine how many square feet in the financials or anything like that. And then you get to the real world and it's like you're using your own money, and it's like, no. We started Acceleration Iowa basically in a closet. We had an overspeed treadmill, so you don't need a lot of space to train. And we started from scratch. And so that's where Acceleration Iowa started. That's where I started. We were basically in probably a 1,200 square foot room, had an overspeed treadmill. And I remember working multiple jobs when we were starting Acceleration Iowa just to continue to do that and build the business so I can make ends meet. So that's one thing you don't think about when you're in college starting your own business, is how you're going to make it work financially. I remember that was my goal right away. It was like, I hope that someday I can only work at Acceleration Iowa or train athletes. I don't have to work at Wells Fargo, which I did. I don't have to be a substitute teacher, which I did. So that was like the first stepping stone for me, was growing that business so I can make a career out of it. And then once you get to that point, then we've moved to another facility. We added our CrossFit program, and it's the same thing. You're building that program up from scratch. And then finally, we have our CrossFit, North Ankeny CrossFit, our Acceleration Iowa programs now. And then from there, we just moved into our current facility 4 years ago now.
2019.
2019. Yeah. So that's kind of where our home facility is now. We have 5,000 square feet. It's a great location in Ankeny. We have our CrossFit on one side. We have our Acceleration Iowa on the other side.
And then in May of 2022, we actually opened up one in Huxley. So we have Huxley Fit Club, which is it's new now, like the fledgling state. So like I said, Jeff Woody. And so for the students that are here, so I played football here from 09 to 13. And when I came in, I was in high school. I wanted to be an architect because that's a job, and it was a fun job. And then I wanted to be a doctor. And so my kinesiology degree was actually kines pre-med. And then my grades were only okay. Like it was like 3.2, which is like good. But if you want to get into medical school, like that's not really good. So then I went to graduate school because I also had 1 year of eligibility left, and I was already on track to graduate. So in my head, I was thinking, I'm going to go to graduate school. So I got my master's in biomedical sciences. And in my head, I'm going to go to medical school. Like that's what I'm going to do. Because one thing that I was just thinking of is like, there's 4 arenas generally when someone comes in, at least from casual conversation. Like when someone comes in, there's like 4 arenas that you can do when you come into a kinesiology degree that people think, like broad strokes, which is you're going to be a strength coach, you're going to be a PE teacher, You're going to be a personal trainer, or you're going to go to professional school to be a doctor or physical therapist or something else. Like, you're going to use this as a jumping off point to go to the other one. And like, I didn't end up in any of them, but I was really sure that I was going to end up going to medical school. So when I was in graduate school, I was doing the calculus on it of like, okay, if I go to medical school, then I'm going to have to go to 4 more years of school after I've already done 6 years of school, which is going to make me 28 by the time I graduate. And I'm going to have $300,000 in student loan debt. And then I'm going to do an internship or whatever you want to call residency for another 3 years. So then I'm going to be 31 before I graduate. And then by the time I graduate from that residency, I'm going to have $300,000 of student loan debt that the only way you can pay that debt off is to actually be a doctor for like 7 years. So I'll be 50 or 40 before I can even decide if I like it or not. So I was like, I can always go back. And my internship that I had to do for kinesiology credit is I actually was an intern for Shawn in 2011-ish. So he was my boss for a while.
Pretty strict.
Yeah. What a dick. And so when I did that, while I was in my second year of graduate school, I was like, all right, I'm going to go get a full-time job. And I worked at a sister facility, the Waukee location, of Acceleration Iowa and CrossFit. And I worked full-time there. And the thing that I realized that I liked, that what I thought I wanted to get out of medicine, it was the helping people part, is like making people better. And what you get from fitness and exercise is that in like just a cocained up short juice. So like, you're not going to have someone come in and say that they're sick, or they have like their child is sick, make this better. I have a broken arm, heal it up. But when someone comes in, no one ever comes into a gym and leaves the gym in a worse mood than they came in. So usually people improve their mental state immediately. And then you do that enough times over time, and then they improve their physical health substantially. So like the thing that I wanted to do, like the helping people part, got that from physical fitness, but still didn't think it was a career because it's not one of the 4 that you can do. It's not PE teacher, personal trainer, go to graduate school, or strength coach. It wasn't one of those 4. So when I went and got a big boy job at a desk job, hated it. And then actually came back and was full time at North Ankeny CrossFit before we ended up buying the thing. And once we bought it and are able to run it, we've now made it to the point where we have Shawn and I making full-time livings off the business. We have 3 full-time staff that make their living off the business. And we have another 5 to 7 part-timers that just help with the thing. And so we've figured out a way to become professionals in the thing that we didn't think we were actually going to be, at least that I didn't think I was going to be professional.
When I was in college, it was not on my plan to own a gym. And it's one of those things we kind of just grew into, and we were really both passionate about it. And that's how we made it happen.
Yeah. So like, now that kind of we've caught up at least a little bit with who we are and kind of where we're coming from, the thing that, if I was to give advice then to myself at, I don't know, 20, to be able to get here, is don't pigeonhole yourself into something that you think you're going to do, and just be open to the opportunity of trying other stuff. So once we tried tried more things, I got outside of the box that I was expecting to, it actually made it so I found the thing I liked to do completely by accident. So, I mean, Deb wrote down a question, it was like, what was the best advice you got? Like, basically another question is, what advice would you give yourself at 20 now?
For me, I mean, that's tough. When I was 20, I'm 38. I still don't really know what I want to do with my life, but I'm enjoying what I'm doing right now. The best advice I could give myself was to get as many different experiences as you can. I remember doing a couple like pre-internships at Ames Racket and Fitness at the time. Like I said, I did my internship at Acceleration Iowa. I wish I would have probably at that time got a little more experience in some other areas. That's one thing I would recommend for most people.
Yeah.
And I know you probably hear that all the time, but it is the best advice.
I think other stuff, like this is more just generally. So like in kind of talking with the students before we started recording, is a lot of them are PE majors as opposed to like what we were, which is I was pre-health professional. But regardless of what arena kinesiology kind of leads you into, there's like sort of little bits of advice that like how to be, the title of this thing is like how to be professional in the fitness industry. So the first thing is, when I was an intern, I got my internship from Jack Whitver, who owned the business before we did. And the internship program was kind of shoddy as far as like getting it set up. It was like a week and it was like, all right, here you go. Here's the keys. But one of the things that he said is that everyone's favorite word is their own name and everyone's favorite conversation is about themselves. And to peel a layer deeper than that, it's like, no matter what you're doing in this field, the whole thing is built on trust. So in order for people to take your advice, which is really what you're not selling a thing. Like if you're an engineer, you sell stuff. You build stuff, you sell stuff. If you're a business major, you buy things and you sell things. If you're a kinesiology major, you sell information. Like your brain is what people are paying for. You're not building a house. So in order for people to trust the information you're giving, they have to know that you actually give a shit about them and you actually want to help them in order for them to take your advice. And in order for them to take your advice is the only way that your product is going to work to get them to come back again. So even if you don't genuinely care about the people, which that seems like good step one is actually care about the people you're
It's going to be
with.
hard to make a career, if you don't care about the people.
But two is when you're interacting with clients or interacting with anyone, everyone's favorite word is their own name. Everyone's favorite conversation is about themselves. So one of the things that we have, especially when we're dealing with adults, because kids, you can talk about anything. But when we're dealing with adults is one of the rules we have is everyone gets their own name said twice in class by staff members. So when you come in, we're going to say, hey, Shawn, how's your daughter doing? How was the dance competition for her this weekend? Whatever. Talking about them. And no matter what thing you're in, the instant that you start talking and using someone's name, their wall comes down and they start accepting whatever you're saying, no matter how ridiculous, good or bad it is, because they know that you actually have some level of care about them.
I remember the exact same conversation when I did my internship with Jack. So, and it gets, as an introverted guy, it gets easier. The more you do that, the more, like if you approach someone right away when they walk in the door as a coach, if I approach someone, like that gets easier over time for me to have conversations with them. And eventually those conversations just build up, week by week, what's going on in their lives outside of the gym. And that's how you build relationships. And that's how you keep your actual members in the gym.
Yeah. And members in the gym, or even just kids in class that are engaged, like either one of those things, regardless of what client base you're working with, in order for that client base to be engaged with you, want to come back, that person, they have to know that you care. Like, and the other thing, which is kind of like piggybacked off that is, well, the second part of it is, if you're doing that well, you are going to become a therapist, whether or not you want to be. So when you start talking to people about themselves and genuinely giving some type of interest, that those people will then trust you with information that you really didn't want. Like, not necessarily that you didn't want it in a bad way. Like, it's horrible information. Like, I stabbed a guy. It's not that. But you are going to get information of like, I'm not feeling that great. I don't know if my relationship is going to last. And you're like, you've been married for 12 years. I don't know if I really want to have that conversation with you.
But at that same time, like that just shows the amount of trust that they have in us.
Yeah.
Like if they're going to share stuff like that. So,
and I think that also goes like with kids, that's especially important because I think to me, and you actually have kids and you've worked more on the AI side, I would say more on the adult side, but with kids, it feels like you have two buckets. Kids are either going to volunteer every bit of information they've ever known, or they're going to tell you absolutely nothing ever.
Yep.
And if you're in this vomit information kid, then that's fine. Like you're going to get whatever you need. But the kid that doesn't ever say anything, if you can care about them enough that they feel heard, then
and they want to open up to you, yep.
Then you're going to be able to connect with that kid. And especially one thing that in the last the episode you did with Tucker, one of the things that Tucker was saying that I really liked was just talking about like building the relationship that kids have with exercise, fitness, and training as early as they can and as positive as they can. So I don't know if you can expand upon the conversation that you guys had.
Yeah, I remember when I did AI back in the day, like we had multiple athletes that would quit they were done playing and they would continue to come in throughout their high school years and just train with us just because they enjoyed it. And they enjoyed the conversations that we would have, even though they didn't play sports. So when you have that amount of trust and they feel comfortable with you, and just to build, like you said, get them excited about fitness in general, I think that's really important at a young age.
Yeah. And that therapist part, you don't necessarily have to be really good at giving advice. Like I remember there was one thing I was listening to a podcast or something, very meta, talking about a podcast on a podcast. But they were talking about how early versions of chatbots they programmed one, and it was at Harvard or Yale or something like that. And they programmed one to only ask questions. That no matter what you were doing, no matter what input that thing, the person gave into it, the response was always just a question. And people started crying by the time they got done with this chatbot who didn't care. Like, it was a machine that was just responding with questions. But by getting people to talk about themselves, you start getting people to open up to little stuff. Like, you start getting the emotional part of them that they didn't expect to come out and that you didn't have expect to come out. And then one other thing that I was going to like piggyback on top of that. So like, if you become sort of like a therapist, then that implies that you have some type of answer, even if you don't. So whether you're a kid or you're an adult,
Assuming we have it together.
assuming that we have it together. And so like for me, and this is again, whether it's you're a doctor, whether you're a strength coach, whether you're a trainer, whether you're a PE teacher, is imposter syndrome is going to be a thing that follows you. So understanding how to deal with that now as a professional is going to be really beneficial, especially as a young person trying to get into a field. When you go, all right, let's do this thing. The baseline understanding of that is, I know what to do. And when you carry yourself around day after day after day with the outward expression of, I know what to do, when you actually don't, like, it's a weird, jarring phenomenon of understanding, maybe I actually don't have it figured out. So
my favorite, it's the best part about being an owner. Like, I get questions all the time in the gym, and 90% of the time that's an Amy question. That's a Jeff question. It's like, I don't know the answer, and I'm fine referring to them.
And like, to me, especially because, so this is a little bit of background. When I was played football, was team captain, was sort of in the public eye a little bit. Probably, I mean, if you kids are somewhere between, well, these kids are somewhere between.
How many of
22.
you guys know who Jeff is?
25. There we go. There's one.
I was probably
Somebody
right
there.
next to you.
Sweet. So you were what, like 10?
Yep.
Yeah. So young enough to sort of maybe understand, but not. I was graduated by the time you guys were playing a high school sport. So when you're playing football, you're sort of, or at least in a visible sport. For me, it was football, but like, you're sort of in the public eye, which automatically assumes that you're like, people assume that you're better than you are, like, for no good reason. The fact that if you go and order something, the person behind you might order that same thing just because it's like,
So Jeff
they
got
did it.
Yep.
That's the right thing. And so then like that existence of assuming, having people put more credit to you than is worth, it was really hard for me to give myself grace to know that it's okay to know that it's okay to not have all the answers and to be able to say, that's not right. I might not be right here.
Because if you're like in that position, it's really easy to put a lot of pressure on yourself.
Yeah.
Like, if people are always looking at you like that.
Right. And that same thing applies when you're in front of people, again, whether it's leading a fitness class or interacting with a client, is you have to, there's the expectation that you have the answers. And like, this is another bit of advice that I wish that I would have been able to take as a 20-year-old, is that you don't need to have all the answers. And you also need to have some type of relationship with someone else where it's okay to ask about the questions that you don't know, that whether it's a mentor or like, we can do that a lot between the two of us. It's just like, I feel stupid because I don't know this thing. Do you also not know this thing? And then you kind of understand together that it's okay. So like, when you're in front of someone and the assumption is that you know the answer and you really don't know the answer and you got to pretend like you know the answer, that face only lasts so long. So like,
Eventually the truth will come out.
And so like, making sure that you don't feel bad about yourself for feeling that way, because it's going to happen. Like, you will have to put on a face of, I know what's happening, when you really don't know what's happening. So I think that was another thing, like another little bit of advice that I wish that I would have known when I was 20.
Yeah. There's going to be plenty of things you don't know and long learning curve.
I think the other stuff, like, these are more like business terms. So another thing that I was thinking of about what I wish I would have known, as you mentioned, like running and operating a business.
I remember the project that we did, but like, didn't even think about it applying to the real world because I never planned on owning a gym. But yeah, like going through like just our monthly budget each month, like, it's stuff that, I never thought about before owning a gym.
Yeah. Like, what level of insurance do you need to carry?
Yeah, like it's never crossed my mind.
And I have some terms like written down here as far as like what notes I would need to, like what stuff that I would need to provide, what business information would I need to provide? Because like as a background on as another little bit, kind of the framing is what do I wish I would have known when I was 20, as far as business terms, is if you're running if you end up in the private sector of anything, whether that is training or whether that's in therapy or whether that's in whatever, if you end up in the private sector, there is a necessary level of business that you have to do, because you have to keep the doors open. Like your time is worth something because everyone has to make a living. You got to pay rent. You got to buy food. So when you do those things, there's two things that are really, really important. One is professional competency. Like you got to be good at what you do, no matter what you're doing. You have to yoga instructor, therapist, gym owner, like CrossFit, youth speed, whatever it is. You have to be good at what you do. But on the other side, you also have to have a rudimentary understanding of how business works. And if you don't, you need to. Like that will be forced upon you whether or not you want it or whether you want it or not. So I don't know if there were like, what business stuff do you wish you knew?
Well, my biggest piece of advice would be to get a good accountant. Number one, like start with that because that was a game changer for us. It's also good to have a good lawyer.
Yes.
Ready at all times.
And not because you're going to get sued.
No, yeah. Just legal advice on anything. That helps a lot. So those are my two biggest pieces of advice there. But yeah, there's so many things that pop up on a monthly budget that you don't plan for. And it's like as owners, and that's where our money comes from, like there's been months where we just don't get paid. We'll coach 20, 30 hours a week and we do a lot of stuff on the back end. And it's just like, well, we have to pay this month. I guess we're not getting paid. And that happens not as frequently now, but there's a time where that happened frequently. And it's like, are you able to make it work financially in situations like that?
And like budgeting as a person.
Yeah.
Like another thing that I think I feel like is misconstrued is when, especially Kines, made me as a Kines major thinking like, I'm going to get into help people because helping people is good. And that when you contrast that with business, there's this natural, like, you got to be cutthroat, you got to be mean, whatever, which is like, that word doesn't have to necessarily be bad, where a thing that I wish that I would have understood is that if you do a good job in both the business aspect of it and the training aspect of it, both parties can be happy. Where like you can be happy having made money and they can be happy having spent money because it's good money that they spent.
I still think like the number one, like if you do your best to provide a good product, care for these people, like if you just focus on that and you're not driven by like, oh, I need to make X number of dollars every month, like that's going to be the best way to approach it. And the money will take care of itself.
Yeah.
For sure.
And then at the same time, controlling the amount of money that you're spending.
Yes. I say no to Jeff and our other coaches a lot, and I don't even feel bad for it.
But no, the other thing where I was going to get with that is like when the business aspect of it is like, oh, it's just business. It's not personal. Like, of course it's personal. Like everything's personal. Making money is personal, especially when you're in a business that is selling services. It's all personal. And so treating people with respect, but also fairness and saying, I need to make a living off of this. Is it cool if you pay me? Yes, it's cool if you pay me. But the weaving of personal finance and business relationship, your capacity to execute as a professional is your money by yourself has to be strong enough that you don't need to extort money out of people in order to exist at any given time. So like if you are desperate for money, if you overpaid, you're paying $1,800 in rent, you're paying $1,200 in going out to eat, you bought a dog and that dog has to go to the vet once a month for $700 and your money out is like $4,000.
I think
because you made bad choices.
We could just say if you run like the federal government runs. Anyways, sorry.
So if your money out is really, really high and your money in is dependent upon providing the service to people, in order to make those match, you're going to feel the stress to squeeze as many dollars out of these people as you can, which is inherently not going to be an enjoyable experience for the person being squeezed.
Yeah, that's not how I want to approach a business, trying to get as much money out of everybody that I can.
So if you don't have your personal finances in order and you feel the stress to then squeeze money out of people, then the product is going down, which is sort of, it's like a finger check. Like the harder you pull, the more you try and make it work, the less it's actually going to work. So like you have to have your own stuff in line and then treat people with respect and consideration. And the business stuff will more or less take care of itself if you have the capacity to do that.
And that's hard. I mean, there's been times where we have to increase the rates on our members just for various reasons. And every time we do it, it's like, all right, what can we do to actually add value while we do this so it doesn't seem like we're just charging more money?
Right.
It's like we do the best that we can to provide as much value as possible to make sure that it's worth it for their membership prices.
I think the last couple of things that I was going to say, like just advice to young Jeff or young people generally, and whether or not it's in business or working other places, is the expression of what you can measure, you can change. So when you're working as a human, whatever you put your emphasis on is something that you will then address to make different. And so for us, we have kind of 5 metrics that we use for the CrossFit side, and for the AI side, it's a little bit different. But like one of those is gross revenue. One of those is number of members, and then revenue per member, but also class attendance. Like those things that we want to make sure that we do, because everything we do is class-based. So how many times can you get the person in? And the more times the person's in, the better the service they're going to receive, because if you train 4 times a week, it's better than training twice a week.
So, if you think about it, that's the exact opposite of like a big box gym where it's like, I want you to pay your membership and never show up.
Right.
It's like, if you pay your membership with us and you don't show up, we're going to be emailing you and texting you like, what's going on?
We're going to call you. Basically, if you don't show up in a week, we're going to call you because we want to make sure that you are here. And that's also, we're talking about business, that it makes sure your retention's good, because a person at risk, if they stop showing up, it's really easy to keep not showing up than it is to stop showing up in the first place. And so if you can get that person back in to avoid that cycle of, well, I just don't use this membership, then it's much easier to get them to continue than it is to start again. So your retention is a lot better, but that what you can measure, you can change. And so if you're working with people, so let's say instead of working let's say a person's not motivated necessarily by selling. Are you measuring attendance by your students in class? Are you measuring your participation in XYZ? Are you measuring the number of people that enroll in a certain program? What are the things that you're putting your focus on? Because whatever you put your focus on will actually end up changing in one way or the other, whether or not you then do something about that. So if you say, we want a number of classes in a week, but we don't do anything to change it, and that number drops, then we've done something to cause that number to drop. So we then need to change it to bring that number back up. So what you focus on grows. So being really selective with what you measure, because had we not included things like average attendance in a week or the number of times that they actually engage in the socials that we have, if we don't track those things, then, we only track revenue, then a person's only worth the revenue that they're bringing in, which then they become a number, which then they become a paycheck. And then when they become a paycheck, they stop becoming a person, which is a really shitty way to operate in service business. So that's one. There's no other leverage you need to do. And the second thing is systematize everything, but never become a robot, because you are, again, we're in the service industry, like plain and simple, no matter what it is in the kinesiology field, you are in the service industry. You're there to serve people. So your impact, whether that be emotional or financial or whatever stamp you're going to leave on the world, is magnified. It's basically the equation of your access times your time. So like you either have to increase your access to people, like you become Jocko Willink, or I don't know if you guys know who that is, or David Goggins, or someone like that, who those guys, they don't serve a lot of people, but their audience gets a lot bigger. And so their impact becomes a lot bigger. Or you become someone like, I'm trying to come up with an easy example, the knees over toes guy. Like,
oh, Ben Patrick, yeah.
So Ben Patrick, who, if your exposure then, if you're trying to make as many of yourself as you can, you then provide education and training to other people to take your methodology to someone else. Because if you do neither one of those things, if you never systematize yourself in a way to expand your impact or expand your time, to multiply your time, basically making more little use. Like if you can take your brain and put it in someone else's brain, then you become 2 of you. And so if you can do that times 100, that makes you in 100 places. And so if you can't if you can't do that, so thinking about it more like using a therapist as an example. If you charge $100 an hour, you can maximally do $100 per hour per client. You will never increase your revenue. You will never increase your impact unless you can, one, start seeing more patients, which then you've got to bring your time per patient down or bring your patients in or not sleep. Like one of those few things. Or you start trying to hopefully increase your rate, which maybe will work. But like if you can't increase your $100 per hour, you can only see the people that you're there. And if you never hire anyone on, you can't help more people. You are limited to the amount of people that you have in time. So systematizing things makes it so you can either maximize the impact you have on people, whether that be Jocko, David, whatever, and you start getting a social media exposure, or you maximize your time by making more U's, which means then you have 240 hours in a day as opposed to 24 hours in a day because there are 10 U's instead of 1 U. So I think that was the other thing that I was thinking about is just know the levers you need to control and then systematize everything you can, but don't become a robot.
That's one of the things that we're trying to do with our AI program right now is we have a great director, Tucker. We're trying to basically take everything that he does and replicate it somewhere else. So that's what we're working on right now.
Just trying to expand the reach and time you have. So I don't know, that's all the stuff that like I think that kind of wraps up like what I wish I would have known at 20 that I know now. And it's not an exhaustive list because there's a lot of dumb shit that I did between 20 and now.
Same.
So at this point, are there any questions from the peanut gallery on this or basically anything else that you're interested in hearing a geezer's perspective on? Yes.
So we talked about how like what you're selling is like a physical product that is on like your brain essentially. As like a lot of us going into like be future PE teachers, a lot of times like there's like a lot of schools are trying to like lower the amount of time students spend in PE. They don't think it's like needed. And so we're told that, and then like people that say, oh, it's just playing games, there's no real like academic worth in PE. Do you guys ever find yourself having to like defend your product? Like you have people that don't see the point in it, so you have to like...
I'll repeat that question so we can get it on the recording. So the question was, as a lot of you guys are being PE majors, you're sometimes forced to defend the value of PE relative to the other classes. And the question was, do we ever feel the need to defend our product?
I would say there's definitely going to be skeptics out there, but like that's not the people that we're going to deal with. Like people aren't going to come in and say, hey, this isn't needed. I think that like going into PE, I think that's great. I think the kids should have more exposure to active and like with the rising obesity rates, I think if it was up to me, they'd have PE every day. They'd have 3 recesses every day. That's just how I raise my kids. Like I want them to be active. I want them to compete and play games. And honestly, like our youngest sports performance, when I try to sell to a parent, I'm like, this is basically a glorified PE class. Like we're going to compete, we're going to have fun, we're going to work together, we're going to work hard. Like that's what I tell kids when I'm selling them, or tell parents when I'm selling our program for our younger kids.
To answer more directly the question, do you ever have to defend your program? Yes. I mean, especially because, so if I say CrossFit, how many of you guys have a positive association with CrossFit?
For sure.
Somewhat. Some people do. Other people, So usually you get about 50-50. And I jokingly say like, when you go and you go to a wedding, you're sitting at a table and someone goes, oh, what do you do? I'm an accountant. Oh, cool. What do you do? I'm a lawyer. What do you do? I work at Wells Fargo. What do you do? I own gyms. Oh, cool. What kind? If I say sports performance, people are like, cool. I get that. But if I say CrossFit, there's a 50-50 chance someone goes, that's cool. Or a 50-50 chance someone goes, are you in a cult? Like that type of response. And so there is naturally a defense of that position that you have to say, which is like, which is sort of different in that it generally gets a bad name because it started as a position that was so different than what existed in the first place that like as a first impression, people said, new is bad, different. And so then that sort of stigma has sort of started to wear off, but it's enough to the point where people you have to justify it. But as far as like defending the position of something like physical education, I think in winning an argument, I bring it back to like my dad when I was growing up. So my dad was the oldest boy on a 2,000-acre hog farm, who was a 4-time state place-winning wrestler, who went into the Air Force, who then went into construction. So you can imagine the personality type that my dad is. And in order to win an argument with my dad, you can't do it by brute force. And I've sort of taken that approach to other conversations, which is a way better way to convince someone of your position is to have them convince themselves of your position.
Let them figure it out.
So if you were to, like, in defending PE, it's a little bit different because you have to like talk to, you know, it would be talking to school boards or talking to other teachers or talking to administrators, which is not necessarily the same thing. But if I'm trying to convince my dad of going somewhere to eat and he goes, let's go out to eat somewhere, and I want to go, I don't know, get burgers, then I can just say like, oh, it's kind of nice outside. Like, you want to grill? And then he goes, no, I don't want to grill, but I've sort of planted the seed of grill stuff. That sounds like it could be fun. And then sort of grow it there. And so with to bring that over to defending CrossFit, whenever I get to the point of defending CrossFit, I'll say to the effect of, you know, like, I mean, if weightlifting, usually we try and do a decent amount of weightlifting and do it safely, but we also try and do a little bit of cardio. I mean, what do you do for cardio? And just ask them, and then have them tell me what they do. And I'm like, we kind of do the same thing. And more or less have them tell me that what they're doing is more or less the same stuff that we do. And so from PE, a PE standpoint is, if that person is inherently not physically active, then that you might be arguing against a wall, because if they don't take care of themselves, then the value that physical education or physical activity generally to anyone might not just be in their brain at all. But if someone takes care of themselves but doesn't recognize the value of PE, then it's sort of like, what do you do for fun? Do you feel like if you go for a run before work, like, how does your brain operate better? Let's do that with kids. So it takes the same thing of, at least for me professionally, I discuss better when I disagree with somebody, when I sort of practice the mechanism of planting my idea in another way and letting it grow in their own head, and then let them convince me that I'm right. So, long answer to a short question, but that's kind of how I work. What other questions you guys got?
You guys mentioned a couple times the importance of like having fun and getting people to be physically active and wanting to continue to be physically active. What kind of steps do you guys take to make your gym goers' gym experience fun?
So to reiterate that question for the microphone is, what do we do to make the gym experience fun?
So I'll start with and I don't work with the kids with the Acceleration Iowa program anymore, but our motto was always work hard, have fun. Like, that's what we did. You come in, if you work hard, you have fun, you're going to come back for more. And we always, you know, when I was coaching AI, I would always tell our interns, like, think about the conversation that the kids are having on the way home with their parents. Like, did they have fun? Did they enjoy it? But Tucker, our trainer, he does a phenomenal job, like, right away from the beginning of class. Like, they do competitive stuff. You know, they're jumping over hurdles, they're playing dodgeball, they're chasing each other. Like, first 10 minutes of class, like, they're getting after
games.
it. They are having fun.
And whether you're a 7-year-old or a 18-year-old or a 33-year-old, you still, like, you're playing games is inherently fun. And so with AI kids, it's especially so, because if you don't have them have fun, they get real squirrely real fast.
Oh yeah, so they work hard right away. We do like team competitive stuff right away and get them engaged right away in class. With CrossFit,
it's a little different.
What do you think with CrossFit?
So with CrossFit, actually, there's a science behind that. It's like the goal when you're in front of a class, and I'll just use that term, and PE teachers don't be mad at me for using the term class. But when I'm in front of a class, one is that everyone's favorite word is their own name, and everyone's favorite conversation is about themselves. To make them feel valued is sort of like the first key to making them have fun. Because if they're defensive, if they don't think that you're out for their best interests, they're sort of like walls up or like piss off. Like, those are the two things. But other things that we try and do, and I jokingly refer to it as, I am a caricature of myself when I'm in front of a class, where I normally am chatty. I normally like to joke, but I also am perfectly content existing in silence for 30 minutes. I can do that. But in front of a class, you need to not do that. You need to be a kind of an amplified version of yourself, where if you think something's funny, you might bring it up to other people, because then they might think that it's funny. And when you talk to them about what they're doing, making sure that it comes off with sort of levity. So it's a caricature of yourself, but at the same time, and we tell this to our new employees when we train them as coaches, no one gives a shit about your problems. Like, I mean that in the harshest but the nicest way possible.
It's not why they're here.
When they're in front of a class, they might have come out of a business meeting where their boss screamed at them for 30 minutes about how bad a presentation was. And if they come into your gym, they're coming off to either blow off steam or see their friends or work out or do something that's a little bit normal, because they came from something that's not super fun, or their kid just threw up on the couch. Like, they're not having a good day. If you come in and are like, I'm so tired, and that person's already mad or already irritated, like at that point they go, I am so tired of this right now. And the instant that it shuts down. So you kind of get used to being able to, when you're in front of a class, be the service to them that they need, which in turn fills you back up. Because like, if you see someone who's having a bad day and you can make them laugh. So my goal is always to make someone feel something positive, whether it's humor or joy or pride or something like that before they leave. And so when they leave and they go, I did 10 push-ups in a row and I've never done that before. And I make sure that I'm like, good job, like really proud of you out of that. And they feel something positive when they leave, then we're good. So that's my goal. And then when I see that, like I get joy from someone else doing that. So it's more or less, it's putting a face on that the people need to see for your service.
And for me, that's like, I'm an introverted guy, like quiet guy. I'm completely different when I teach a class, and I have to be. But we do other fun stuff too. Stupid Game Day Friday.
Stupid Game Day Friday.
Play stupid games on Friday. Yesterday I was coaching, we had a big class, and we were finishing our dynamic warm-up. It was 5:30 in the morning, and I got them lined up. I'm like, we're going to start competing, and they didn't know what we're doing. And I'm like, speed walk races, go. And you would be surprised how many people were getting after it, speed walking across the gym. Just little fun things like that, just to keep them engaged.
And recognizing though that the industry that we're in is inherently fun. Like people don't go to a gym to have a bad time. Like they go to a gym naturally to at least sort of have fun. So it's an easier the ball's teed up a little bit higher for you, as opposed to like if you're an attorney, like how do you make that experience fun? Like, you're filing the paperwork today.
Cool. The more experience you get just coaching classes, like the easier it's going to be to come up with fun stuff like that to do too. Like you figure that out.
I guess I have one.
Sure.
We talk about intrinsic motivation is kind of an issue with like secondary and physical education, and like obviously it is with adults too in physical activity. So maybe you have any thoughts on kind of conjuring up some intrinsic motivation in people to be physically active and proactive in their health?
Okay, so the question was, how do you get people to, the intrinsic motivation problem, how do you get people to want to do it? Everyone's favorite word's their own name. Everyone's favorite conversations about themselves. The first step in getting someone to want to do something is you actually genuinely have to care about them. Like they have to feel like they are welcomed in the space that they're in. And so whatever that, like imagine going to school and just as a class, like not even in PE, like you go to school and you kind of want to learn. You're not sure if you want to learn. And the teacher goes, open your books. Like at that point, and they treat the class more or less like that, then it's not like you wanted the thing more or less inherently. It's the actions that the other person gave to you, which reinforced what other people think about that thing. So then you start to plant like, school shouldn't be fun. Like this person doesn't have fun.
You could almost tie that in with the last question too. Like make it, like try to make it fun. Like that's what's going to get them engaged, which that's what you guys are, I guess, going to have to figure out as PE teachers, right? Make it fun.
And so like for me, it would just be making sure that the space that you have in there is a genuinely concerned space for the kids that are there. And if they know that you care, then whatever you have them do becomes valuable. And if they think that you don't care, no matter what you do, it's not valuable. And so by genuinely providing a space that kids feel like they're important, then the action becomes, whatever you're doing in there then becomes associated with that positive feeling. Like a thing as far as like intrinsic motivation with adults, there's a reason. So our churn, are you guys familiar with the statistic of churn? So it's the inverse of retention. So if you have 200 people and you have 190 members and you have 10 trials in a month, and in the next month you had 192 members, 8 of those people did not convert. Your churn is 8 divided by 200 of the total number, so your churn would be 4%. So more or less, it's how many people did you see that left and didn't convert into members? So our churn, industry average is generally 5 to 9%, somewhere in there. Our churn is like 2 or 3. So we keep our people really well. And that's not because we're excellent at training, but the environment that we have on the CrossFit side is, I want to go to class because my friends are in class. And what we're doing just happens to be exercising. If I went to see that same group of people and we consistently played Ultimate Frisbee, or we consistently went and ate at a restaurant, but I like these people, then whatever thing that I'm doing with those people becomes the blessing of that group of people. So I want to go to class because I'm going to see Justin, or I'm going to see Sheena, or I'm going to see, Tyler, or whoever the people that you're excited to see. And then the emotion that that group of people gives you, it bleeds into the activity. So then when you do that activity, you go, this is kind of cool. And so when Shawn was talking about like the relationship with kids to exercise, is when that relationship is inherently positive, that it is fun to go to PE class. I know that I matter. If I had this really bad test or whatever, my teacher yelled at me because I was talking or whatever, and they come in there hanging their heads, and you go, hey, Silas, what's going on, buddy? And like Miss Johnson yelled at me. I was like, hey, tell me about it. Like, what's going on? And know that you just give a shit about that kid. Then that kid will, even if it's not in that moment, will sort of like tick the meter up a little bit. Like they like you a little bit more. They trust you a little bit more. And then the thing that you're doing is cool. So like having that positive relationship, that's one of the reasons why we play games, is because then exercise becomes fun and the gym is a good place to go to, so that whatever you're doing in the gym then becomes valuable. So like intrinsic motivation, I think it's not this like magical fountain that comes from the earth. It's the situations that the person is involved in that then bleed into what they actually like to do. That's a deep question.
I have a question for you.
What?
And we have a lot of PE. So I was trying to think about like just looking at our CrossFit members. Like I always think of someone like if you're going to do CrossFit, you were like diehard PE. Like, would you think that's true with most of our members?
I would say it's like 70% true.
Really?
Like there's still 30% of people that they started because their friends started and they wanted to hang out with their friends, and then all of a sudden they decided that they actually liked it because they gained 5 pounds of muscle and they can sort of start seeing the top 2 abs that they could never seen before, and they're like, oh, that's
what about
kind of
for
fun.
like competitive CrossFitters?
Oh, competitive
like if you're a
CrossFitters,
competitive
100%,
CrossFitter,
yeah.
like you're putting your score in, it's like you had to have been a diehard.
If you're,
fan,
then
right?
you're just a competitive athlete. Like,
Yeah.
one of the things I went into CrossFit because you can compete, and like played college football, played 4 sports in high school. Like I'm a competitive asshole. Like when it comes into some type of competition, I generally don't do well with losing, and I generally don't do well with like, let's just do this for fun. Like, so I jumped in to do it because of that reason, but then I stay doing it because of the people that are around. Yep. So I think, if you're going to be competitive in anything, that's gym class hero. 100%.
And honestly, I have no idea what PE class is even like right now. Like I'm 20 years removed from a PE.
So have you guys done internships with PE classes yet?
We do like observations, but not.
Okay.
Our internship is like student teaching that we do at the very end.
So what are the, is it games? Is it structured? Are you doing like archery classes? Like what are the things that you guys are doing? Everything?
PE's kind of shifting more from just like getting the kids to run around to, we have 5 national standards, so there's one where it's just like skills for them to use. One was like finding the value in physical activity and fitness and seeing that as something valuable for a lifetime. There's a cognitive aspect to it too, like strategies and enjoyment. So we're kind of shifting towards those 5 standards. So yeah, it's not just, in lifetime sports and skills, like archery, but then team sports. There's a lot of different classes.
Yeah.
But in like observations, we still see a lot of like classes that are very much just let the students do what they want, as long as they're running around doing something.
Yeah. I would imagine, especially as it gets younger, like it's just, if you got a group of 2nd graders and they're feeling squirrely, having them play baseball, like not exactly going to happen. So it's like, all right, we're playing freeze tag today. Go.
There's even like some high school classes that the teachers are just kind of, they sit on the side, just kind of let the students do whatever, whether it's, they give them the basketball and they just kind of go let them shoot around for the whole time.
Would you do that in class?
Probably.
I loved it.
You liked it?
So
I'm just going to shoot around?
Yeah.
I'm curious on like the perception. So the one of the students was saying, if the mic didn't pick it up, is that there are certain classes sometimes where it's just the instructor provides just some equipment and then kind of sort of lets the kids go. And I was just curious on the taking. It was like 60. I don't know. How many would be cool with just providing equipment, letting them go to high school kids? So raise a hand of how many would just is okay with that. Just like doing your own thing. And how many would cringe at the fact of just letting high school kids do their own thing? Okay, so we're like 100% want structure. Same. Amen.
Same.
That's why we do class-based stuff and not open gym, come in and do things, because what you're paying me for is come up with a plan, not paying me to sit there. So anyway, we got any other questions from you guys? It's been kind of fun.
I guess that's kind of another question. Do you see better retention on people that do go to your classes than people that just purchase memberships and go on their own time?
100%.
We really don't have too many people that go on their own time.
I mean, because this is, I mean, long answer to a short question. So there's two main industries within, well, a few main industries within fitness. One is big box fitness, which is Anytime Fitness, Lifetime, Ames Rack and Fit, where it's a really low monthly cost, but you're signing up for a contract. So like $1 a month to start, and then it's $10 a month. Well, if they're only getting $10 from that member, you need a lot of members in order to make your general revenue. And so our memberships start at $139 for adults, and for kids, they start at $159, and then they go down from there. But the lowest membership package that we have is $79 a month for 2 days a week for CrossFit, and $109
That's for just Huxley, right?
for Huxley,
Yeah.
and then $79 or $109 for 1 day a week or something like that with kids. So it's naturally substantially higher priced, but you're paying for us to be there and structure everything. And so if you want to just come in and do your own thing, it doesn't really make sense for you to pay for a membership to come to ours, because
You can do that
it's
anywhere.
way more expensive to come to our place to just go to the gym versus it is to go to Anytime Fitness. So the big box gym is counting on 10 people at $10 and only one of them or two of them showing up, versus we have one person at $100 and counting on them showing up. Because imagine so we have our membership base across the 3 locations businesses, like 430 people. If we were charging like 10% of that, the $12 versus $120, we would then have to have 10 times the amount of people. We'd have to have 4,000 members. If we had 4,000 members and all of them showed up in a day, like imagine, this is probably half the size of one of our facilities. Imagine 4,000 people running through this in a day. Like, it would never work. And so that big box fitness style sort of plans on the fact that most people are going to be like, oh shit, I forgot that I have that. Like, there's a portion where you kind of want people to not come in order to make the money, make it work. So long answer to a short question. We have very few people that just buy a membership to use it. Most of the people that buy a membership are wanting to come to classes because they'd go somewhere else if they just wanted to do their own thing, which is fine. We don't need to serve everybody. There's a purpose for everything.
I guess I have a question as well. So, obviously, being former kinesiology majors, we harp around here that exercise is medicine. Mm-hmm. So, how do you promote that to your members? I know most of them are there because they have a passion for exercise, but how do you teach them the importance of you might enjoy what you're doing and you're getting the benefit of health out of this, but how do you break that down to them as far as the information that you're doing?
So the question was, exercise is medicine, as is one of the mottos of the Kines department. And how do we communicate that, or do we communicate that hard with members?
You got this one, buddy. That is a good question.
So I think the thing that we try and do is, goal setting is a weird thing to do. So the purpose of the activity. So with sports performance, I want to be faster for football season. It's April. I need to work toward football season. There's a goal, there's a time, there's a deadline timeline. When you're done playing sports, I need to just have this body work for as long as I can, do as much as I can for as long as I can. And so by framing the goal of what you're doing, you then allow to the communication to the members to say the point of us squatting is not to have the heaviest back squat that we can. So I don't want you to cut corners on depth because you're trying to put the highest number up that you can. I want you to hit full depth that your joints will allow for now, because it's going to promote the best joint and bone health by the time you're 70. So it's communicating the impetus for why they're there in the first place, sort of gives them the reason. So standing over a barbell when someone's or someone's about to jump up on the pull-up bar and you're like, hey, whoa, get down. No, time out. Pulling people back, because you're then, and if someone gets oh, yeah, why you do whatever, then you can say look, we're not trying, no one set a land speed record. You're not qualifying for the Olympics here. I don't care if you do a snatch here. If your shoulders are sore and tired, it would be bad for you to do this, because now your shoulders will be hurt. And all of a sudden you can't come in you gain weight, nothing works. So it's more or less kind of stopping people and communicating them what the point of them being in there in the first place is.
And I think a good goal, like it's hard to tell somebody, like you can obviously say, yeah, it's going to help you, the benefits, but until they actually feel that, like they're going to have to figure it out on their own. So the biggest thing that we can do then is to help them consistently get into the gym. And if they can consistently get in the gym, they're going to feel those improvements. And then I think that's the best way.
Cool. Thanks, guys.
Thanks for tuning in to Fitter Every Day. For more information on our programs, locations, or any of the content that we have to offer, go to www.goldfinchathletics.com. And if you want us delivered directly to your mailbox, go to the newsletter tab while you're at the website. For any information or links mentioned in this episode, check the show notes. We'll check you next episode.